Record. All right. So today I'm going to be going over Redux with the Pokemon API and trying to create. Sorry. And trying to create a Redux store with that. All right, we're just getting started. This is just a blank. I can share the URL for this. It's blank for now, but it will be like this will be have all of the code in it. So I just put it in the web part-time 21 channel, Ryan. All right, get out of there now. All right, so I'm going to be using the Pokemon API, which if you've never used the PokeAPI, it's fairly simple. I'm going to be using it in a kind of a search way. Well, a couple different ways. I'm going to do it to where the first one you do, you get a list of 20 Pokemon back, and it has a list of 20 Pokemon, right? It's just the name. To start, it's just the name, and then you have to go from there. But I'm going to do that part first, but I'm also going to implement how you can do a search and then get all of that working and keep your Redux store going, all right? The hardest part about Redux is getting everything set up and knowing what you need to install and how you need to set everything up and get everything going in your file structure, right? So because it's Go Sandbox, it makes it super easy to add whatever dependencies you need. The dependencies that we're going to use tonight just for Redux is going to be Redux, which is the first one. The second one we're going to use is called React Redux, which is how Redux and React actually communicate with each other. It's kind of that bridge. Beyond that, I'm going to use a couple of middlewares. One of them is called Thunk. It's Redux Thunk. And then there's also Redux Logger. If I was doing this in VS Code, you would really be able to see why Redux Logger would work. If I were to actually open up the actual main inspect here, you would probably also be able to see Redux. Well, I'll whenever I get there, I'll bring that part up to see if I can't show you guys exactly how that becomes extremely useful. If you guys have any questions as I'm going through it, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question, or you probably have to ping me in Slack or something, because I don't hear the Zoom or the Zoom chat go off if there's a question that way. So, but I'll try to keep that like being able to see that also. All right. The first things that you kind of should always do whenever you're working with Redux is you set up what's called the store, which kind of gives us what Redux is. It's a global state management solution, and you use what's called a state store to be able to store and manipulate whatever data you need passed throughout your entire application. So to create a store, the way that I do it and the way that you're going to be taught to do it at Lambda is you're going to create a directory that's called store. And then inside of that directory, you're going to create two other directories. One of them is going to be the actions, and then the other one is going to be a reducer. All right, so in the actions, all you truly need in your actions file is an index.js file. I did not mean to create a new directory. Eventually, I'm going to stop there, cancel that. There we go. All right, so we just need an index.js file in here for now. That's the most basic way to create an actions file. Your functionality of how you're going to manipulate your data and receive your data and actually do your Axios calls and stuff are going to come from this actions file. Your reducers file is what's actually going to store. I'm also, just so you guys know, I'm also going to install Axios. That way we can actually do API calls. Now your reducers file is what's actually going to house your initial state. It's where I'm going to create an index.js file. And then I'm also going to create, in this case, since we're working with Pokemon, I'm going to create a Pokemon reducer.js file. And this is where your initial state will actually be stored. So the first thing I'm going to create in here is I'm just going to call it initial state. And so const initial state, which should always be an object, right? So it's known as a state object, just like your class components and your functional components that you've already been working on. Your state is generally a state object, right? Even though it may be an array or it may be whatever, it ends up being an object of some sort, and that's the easiest way to dive into that and access that data. With that being said, the state here really is not going to have much in it. To start, I am going to put an is loading, and I'm going to start that off at false. I'm also going to put a what's this? Oh, an is error, because I'm going to want to change that to true if there is an error loading any data. And I'm also going to want to save that error message if there happens to be an error. So that's all I'm going to start this with at the very beginning, right? Outside of that, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a switch statement before. It's very similar to an if-else statement, right? So it takes a certain case and it kind of goes through and it says, if this case is true, like if we find this case to be true, then I want you to do this. If this case is true, do this. And then there's a default return. That's pretty much exactly what you're going to be doing inside of here for every piece of your state that you want to update. So we're actually going to create this here. We're going to go ahead and do our export. And I'm just going to call this my Pokemon reducer. If I can spell Pokemon reducer. All right. And then your reducers are always going to take in and two things here. All right. So it's going to take in your state object. But I'm going to set my state object is always going to start with my initial state. And then the second thing it's going to take is an action. Action is going to be an object. That object is going to have a type and a payload. All right. So right for now, I'm going to close this over here for now so I have more screen. But all right. So in this function, now we have exactly what we're going to be working on here. And we're going to have our first switch. And then what the actual thing it's going to be looking at here, what it's going to be testing, right, is going to be that type. So everything that's going to be in here, each one of your cases is going to be one of your types, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that type in just a moment, whenever I actually start out with the actions file, all right? So we're going to do this, and then you always want to put in your default, and by your default, you're going to want to return your state. This is the most basic kind of reducer that you're going to be able to create. It's this right here, all right? And because this right here is saying if your type doesn't default to anything, if the type that you're trying to find or make happen, or in the terms of Redux dispatch, if it doesn't exist, then return your default state here. All right. Now, since this being the most basic, then we can move on to the next thing, which is actually going to be setting up the index.js file inside of our reducer. Now, the reason why I created the index.js file in the Pokemon reducer file is because I try to future-proof and provide a scalable solution whenever I build something. So having an index.js file, Redux gives us what's known as combined reducers, which is a kind of a hook that allows you to make multiple reducers for whatever you're working on and combine them into a single thing. So what I'm going to combine into here is, well, first I'm going to import combine reducers. Combine reducers, and I'm going to bring that in from Redux. I think it's Redux. I always get it backwards if it's Redux or React Redux. Give me just a second. I want to make sure. All right, I'm right. Redux. And then the next thing that you're going to want to bring in is the actual reducer file that we just created. So we just created this reducer here, this Pokemon reducer, and we have this exported. And so I'm going to import that into my index here. So import my Pokemon reducer. I'm going to change the name of it just so I don't have to type that out a million times later on in our application. So I'm just going to insert or import that in as PKR. And then I'm just going to say where I'm bringing it in from, which is my Pokemon reducer. All right. And then the last piece that I have to do here is I actually just have to export my combined reducers. Then I just have to pull this combine reducers, and then this right here is just going to be an object where I'm just going to have PKR for now. So now this is going to allow the entire application to access that state from anywhere. As soon as I finish setting up the store in my index.js file here. All right. So just like whenever you're doing routing with React Router DOM, there is something that you need to provide here, which is provider. And that's going to come in from React Redux. All right. And that's what's actually going to house your state store. All right. So this is actually what you need to wrap your application in this. That way everything has access to it. So anything that's wrapped in this will have access to your state store. All right. With a couple more things that you have to do. And those couple of things are, we're going to have to import, create store and apply middleware. Apply middleware. And this is going to come from Redux. We're going to import in Thunk from Redux Thunk. And then we're also going to import in our logger from Redux Logger. All right. So all of these right here are going to do, it's pretty self-explanatory. The create store is actually going to allow us to make this into the store, to make this where Redux can say, okay, so this is where everything is housed, and this is how it can communicate with everything else in the application so it can access that state. Thunk and Logger are both middleware that are really great for debugging. The only problem is we don't have a in here in code signal, you can't really use it because it doesn't really work. But I'm going to see if I can't show you guys what it looks like outside of that. So now that we have all this stuff imported, now we just have to create the store. And to create the store, you just const store is going to be equal. Oh, last thing. I always forget this one. You need to import in root reducer from your reducer file here. So we're going to bring this in from store/reducers. And then that that should get it that. All right. So here we're going to call our create store. We're going to pass in our root reducer. And then we're going to also pass in our apply middleware. All right. And then in our middleware, we have our Thunk and our logger. All right. So that has everything created. And now we just have to pass in that store into our provider here. All right. And I'm hoping I did all of that correct. All right. So now there's no more errors because it sees that there's some place for it to actually be able to get that information from. All right. The only things I've done up until this point are just the generic getting everything up and going and set up to be able to use Redux. that's why you always have to make a decision of whether you're going to use some sort of global state management solution like Redux, or whether you're going to use something like UState and manage your state locally. If you're only working with some sort of a form, like a login form, a registration form, something to that effect, there's no reason to use Redux for something as simple as that application. And all form state should pretty much be managed locally, because I mean, this is a lot of overkill if all you're doing is creating a form, right? Like, it's a lot of extra work for just a form. Anything more than a form, then the way that I like to determine is, if I have the same piece of state that needs to be passed into multiple components, like if I have like 10 components and they all need the same piece of state, then I'm going to use some sort of global state management, and I'm just going to pass it into each file, versus having to do some sort of prop drilling where I'm passing it down from file to file to file to file to file. Because then if something happens, trying to reverse that and find where you're passing that into really becomes an issue and becomes a headache. I've made that mistake, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I like Redux so much better now anyway. But all right, so outside of that, does anybody have any questions of up to this point? All right, so if no one has any questions up to this point, now we're actually going to start working with building components and creating our API. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my app and I'm going to get rid of this, because that's just do a little bit of house cleaning, get rid of all of this. I don't want any of that there. I'm just going to make an H1 here. It's just going to say Pokemon with Redux. All right. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to come into here and I'm going to create a components file, or a components directory, if I can spell. All right. And then I'm going to create I guess I'll do a poke list.jsx. All right. So pokelist.jsx, we're going to, just like always, we're going to import React. I'm going to bring, I won't bring that in here. I'll just import React from React, and then we'll see what we need from there. Well, no, we're gonna need the connect function. All right. So the way that you allow each of your individual components to access your state store is by something that's called a connect function. So if you import in the connect function, that's going to come from Redux. I almost 100% believe. React Redux. Dang it. See, I always get it backwards. All right. It's going to come from React Redux. All right. You're going to use that connect function to allow you to create or to connect to that state store. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Pokemon list. So function poke list. I'm going to go ahead and pass in props here because we're going to need those. All right. We're going to need those whenever we start connecting to that state. And I'm just going to, for the moment, return, not that. I'm just going to eventually div, I'm just going to say poke list, just so we see that there's something, and then I'm going to export this out. So export default. The only difference between what you've been doing and how you're going to connect it here is you're actually going to use your connect function here, and you're going to connect it like this. And then you're going to pass in the name of your component in the second set of parentheses. All right. So what goes in this first set of parentheses is what's called a map set to props. And it's also where any of your functionality is going to go. There's two things that'll go in here. The first one's going to be your map state to props. So I'm going to make that functionality const map state to props. You can name this whatever you want to name it. If you want to name this, a lot of times I make it as MSTP, and then it does the same thing, right? And then this gets one parameter because this is a function, right? So this gets one parameter, and that parameter is going to be state. And then this is going to return to you return, and then let's see. I'm just gonna call it is loading, and this is going to be state.pkr.is loading. After I fix that, now this PKR, if you remember back to the reducer file that I created, is what I named this reducer whenever I exported it, right? I exported it as PKR, and so that's what it sees, right? So that's where it comes from. So inside of here, if I console log this state, which I need to import this in first. So I'm going to console log state, map state to props, map state to props. And then I'm going to pass map state to props. And that, I'm going to import this in here. So import all right, so now we see that we have this here. So let's look at what is possibly in our console. All right, so here's my map state to props for my Poke list, right? So if we look in this PKR, it's an object, and if you notice, it has is loading, is error, and error, right? That's exactly what I created inside of my Pokemon reducer. Is error, is loading, and error, right? So that's everything I can access for now inside of my Poke list thing here. So if I created something else here, and let's just say I wanted to create a not an error and just give this a true, right? And now if we see this now that it's reloaded, and I look at the state object again, now I have a not an error as true here, all right? So just because of that connect function, this is able to connect to that. Now, if I console log props in here though, so if I console.log props, the only thing that's going to be seen inside of here is going to be this is loading. All right. Does everybody understand why that's something that's going to be seen in that? All right. So if I wanted to be able to access this is error, then I have to call that inside of here. And I have to say that it's coming from my Pokemon reducer and it is error. Now, I can make this be named whatever I want it to be named. I can say this, there is an error is the name of it. And then if you look here, the name of it in props is there is an error. All right. That makes sense to everybody? Okay. I'm going to get rid of that though, because I don't need that at the moment. Well, I guess I do need error. So I will bring in my error, and I'm going to bring in, let's see. So my is error, and then state.pkr.is error, and the same thing for the error, but I'm going to call this error message. And that's state.pkr. That needs to be a dot. All right. So now I'm going to get rid of this console log here because I don't necessarily need it. There we go. So now if I wanted to, if there was an error and I wanted to be able to display that error, then I could have this check in here to say props.isError. If there's an error, then I can put, let's say, an H1, and I can have it put the props.error message with an H1, else just an empty JSX tag. All right. So then if I come into my reducer, not that one, let me close out of that. If I go into my Pokemon reducer file, and let's just say I change this to true, and then just to show you guys, and then for error message, this is an error message. Then what you should see show up on the screen is this is an error message. Everybody understand how that this prop is being passed into this file? Everybody good? Okay. All right. So I'm going to change that back to false and get rid of that error message just so it doesn't show up whenever I'm trying to code this out. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this not an error thing, and I'm gonna pick this at false. All right, so believe it or not, the reducer file is the easiest part. So all of this is the easiest part. It makes, I mean, it kind of is kind of self-explanatory, right? It takes that one piece from like your class components and it just puts it in a file on its own, right? Because like this makes sense from seeing your components, how you create that initial state and then how you're modifying that. Now it's going to get into the fun part of actually being able to get data and manipulate that data along with your reducers file. So given the Pokemon API, I just want direct link to the results. I'm going to take this. Copy. All right. So inside of my actions file here, I'm just going to, there we go, do that. Because this right here is going to be the URL to get, let's just say the first 20 Pokemon, right? So now we create our first action. I'm going to call this load, like, I guess, get Pokemon. So export const get Pokemon. All right. This is going, oh, for now, this is not going to take anything, I don't think. And then I'm going to return dispatch. All right. And then I'm going to do something here, right? So this is how you set up an action. This is how you set up any action that you create. This is the basics of that functionality. All right. So that is what you have to get done or have to have it doing so you can actually dispatch an action to your actions file. And what I mean by that is, so I'm going to put dispatch here. And then remember how I said action was an object that had a type and had a payload, right? And how inside of a reducer, it's actually looking for the action.type because that's how it's checking the case, right? So that's what we're going to create here is our first type, which I always like to do 3. For every action, I like to make sure there's 3 dispatches. There's going to be a start, a success message, and then failure, right? So the start is just going to be, I'm just going to call it load start. All right. And then there is no payload to this. But now that I've created a dispatch, now I need to come in here. I need to create a case for it, right? So I'm going to open both these files up at the same time so we can see both of them. So now that I have this load start, I need to create a case for that here. So it's going to be case. And then the case for this is going to be load start, because that's exactly what we called it here. All right. And then in this case, I want this to do something. And that's going to return a modified version of the state. So all I want this to update state here. And then I want this to update is loading eventually is going to go to true. All right, that's all I want it to do as soon as it starts trying to do this, right? So then I want to, the next thing I want to do is actually do my Axios call. So I'm going to import in Axios from Axios, and I'm going to do my Axios call here. So it's going to be my Axios.get, and then I'm going to pass in this URL. All right, and then my .then. For now, I just want to console log my response, because that's what you should always do, right? As soon as you do an Axios call, you should always console log your response, and then you should also create your catch, which your catch is if you have an error, you should always console log that error also. I want to console.log the error. All right. So now I need to be able to call this functionality, right? So just like we did everything else here, and we have all this exported and we have it importing, I need to be able to do the same thing inside of my app, because that's where I want it to initially call this API call, right? So a couple of things that I have to do here is I need to import in my connect function. I need to connect this to my state from React Redux. And then I also need to import in this functionality. The function name is called get Pokemon, so I need to import that in also. So import get Pokemon from, and this is going to come from my actions file, right? So then we just have to find the correct pathway to your actions folder, and then you should be able to access this Pokemon in your map state to props. I'm going to take this piece here off, and I'm going to do this more like all your other components that you'll create, where you're going to have your export default, because remember, we have to call that connect function, all right? We have to call it connect function, and we also need to export it here. So just like we did on the other file where we had to create our map state to props, we need to do the same thing here. So everywhere that you want to create, or you want to be able to access that store, in every component that you want to, you have to create a map state to props function. All right. It's for every single file that you want to be able to access that. And it's all going to do the exact same thing. And you can access whatever information it is that you want to access. You can do that here. So here, I'm just going to put is loading. And I'm going to put the same thing I did before. So state.pkr.isLoading. I'm going to do the is error. State.pkr.isError. And then the error message, which is state.pkr.error, right? Now, that's all well and good and everything, but to be able to access my get Pokemon functionality, there's still one more step I have to take, and I need to be able to import that in down here as well, right? So I have my map state to props, just like in the other one, and then inside of this object, if you notice in the PokeList object, it's empty, like there's nothing that's in there, right? Well, that object is actually used because you need to pass in whatever action that you want to be able to use. You need to pass that in here. right? So I'm going to pass in here get Pokemon. Hold on, I got to throw my cat out real quick. Hold on. Yeah. Sorry. All right. So now the difference is in here, if I console log state here, no, not state, I'm sorry. If I console log the props in here, now the props in here is going to look different from the props inside of my Poke list. So if I do this, I'm going to, so props and Poke list. And then this right here is going to be props in app. So console.log props and app props. Okay. So the difference here, did I not connect it fully? That should be good. Map state to props. What did I not do right here? All right, let's see. Hold on. Did I not do something? Oh no, don't do that. I guess I can just save it. So props and app has nothing but Y. What did I do differently? My return is the same. My connect is the same. Why am I getting no? Let me see. File, save all. All right, there we go. So if you notice now my props in my app, I have my get Pokemon function here, right? Whereas I don't have that inside of my Poke list, right? So the way that I did that and the way that I got that is you have to pass that action into this functionality down here, right? So this object inside of your connect is where that needs to go. So I can then use that in, let's say, a use effect to automatically do that API call as soon as this app component loads. I can have it do that Axios call. So I'm going to just console log this out. And I'm going to import in my use effect here. So use effect. All right. And then I'm going to say use effect. And then I'm going to set it up the generic use effect with the callback function. And then I'm also going to make sure that I go ahead and I put an empty array, dependency array down there. All right. Now to access that get Pokemon functionality, I'm just going to call props.getPokemon, and I'm going to turn it on. All right. So now if you see, now that this is loaded, I have a response here, right? So my response.data, if you notice, this gives me 20 names, and it gives me a total count of how many objects there are. And it also gives me what the next API call is going to be, right? So if I wanted to create a next button, I could have it do an API call with this URL. All right. So I've done this project before. So I know some of the hiccups and some of the bugs with this API and being able to use it. How I did this before, where I put this here, this is why I said I'm like, this is not going to have anything for now, but it is going to use something. And I'm just going to pass a URL into here, right? And then I'm going to change this into a URL, right? Because that's going to allow me to reuse this over and over and over again, right? And get different results. So in my initial thing here, I'm going to pass in this URL as my initial, as soon as my page loads, that's what I want to show up. All right. So now I still get the same thing here. Now, this right here is what I was talking about with that, the Redux logger. That's where this previous state action and this next state comes into play. All right. Let's see if I can get it to actually show what I'm trying to get it to show here. All right, see how this right here has this, let's go back. How it has this previous state, this action, this next state, right? What this right here is that Redux logger. What it allows you to see is what your previous state was, your state object. It shows you exactly what it is. It shows you what action that you took. So this coming from the actions file, what it's dispatching, right? So in this case, it dispatch load start, and then it tells you what your next state is going to be. So our next state is loading is still true because I'm not doing anything with that. And then I haven't updated anything else past that, right? So if I come back into my actions file, now that I know that I get a successful thing here, right? And I know what my data looks like that comes back from the API. Like I know that response.data.results, it's going to be my list of 20 things here, right? But all I'm going to send into my dispatch is going to be res.data. And I will show you guys why in just a minute, because I can update multiple things at one time. So I'm going to create a new dispatch here. So let me do this. I'm going to create a new dispatch. The type for this one is going to be success, because if you get it, you only get a dot then if it's successful, right? So I'm going to create a load success, and then I'm going to give this one a payload, and that payload is going to be whatever that response is. So in this case, it's my response.data is what I'm going to send over. All right. And then my error here, I'm going to also create a dispatch for my error. So my dispatch here is going to be type. I'm going to make this one a load error. All right. And then my payload here is going to be that I'm just going to send over that full error, right? So I'm just going to send over the error. So now, like I said before, anytime that you create a dispatch, there needs to be a corresponding case to that to do something with that information, right? Redux, in my opinion, is very cyclic. Everything works in a cycle. So the first thing we did is we worked inside of our component to find out what data we wanted and what data we needed. The second thing we did is we created an action to get that data, right? So like in this case, we did the Axios call. We created a dispatch. The next piece you do after that is then you go create this for it, like your actual case for that. So like here, I'm going to create my case here for my load success. And then I'm going to make it do something based on the fact that it's successful. All right, so I'm going to return, knowing that I'm passing in this response.data, and I know that response.data.results is going to be my actual Pokemon names. I'm going to give this Poke names is going to initially equal out to an empty array. I'm going to give this a previous, because that's going to be the previous URL. And then next, which is going to be an empty string also for now, right? And then I'm going to make this I'm just going to give Pokemon, and because we'll work on that in a minute. But that's going to be an empty array as well. All right. So because I know what my state looks like, see if you notice now, because it's successful, so it did the Axios call, right? And it was successful. So then my next state, it shows that this is true and whatever, because I haven't created anything in here. But if you see, it already sees that this type exists or this case exists, but it doesn't update anything yet. Though it does see that there's a payload because I'm sending a payload over. All right. So now if I want to return something here, I'm going to say, spread back over the state. I'm going to say is loading. This is no longer going to be true. So this is going to be false. I got to spell it correctly. So is loading is now going to be false because it's not. I'm going to put is error to false. The reason why I'm going to reset that to false here is in case I got an error message before I got a success message, I want to erase that error message and that error out of my state, right? I'm also going to set my Pokemon names. So PokeNames is going to, I'm just going to not equal it. This is going to be equal to my action.payload.results, right? So my action.payload is whatever I sent here. And since I'm sending response.data here, then this needs to be the results because that's what the actual results to this is. So if I look at the payload here, then I see my payload here is count, a next, a previous, a results, etc. Right? So that means in here I can use results, I can use previous, I can use next, I can use whatever I want to use here. So if I do this and I can say previous, right? Because I created a previous piece of state. So previous is going to be action.payload.previous. I don't know what just happened to all that. Okay, so yeah, see, action.payload.previous, which in this case is null. So all that's going to do is that's going to change my state to null. And then I can do the same thing here with the next. And then I can do action.payload.next. And then if we look at the next state, then we should see that eventually, come on. So in my next state here, now I have a URL in my next, my previous is undefined, and my PokeNames array has 20 objects in there. All right. So all from one Axios call, this is how I'm updating all of those things. All right. And I would do the same thing if there were an error, which is what I need to do here. So I need to create the case for if there's an error. If for some reason it doesn't come back successful, so load error, then I want to return, or I'm going to spread over my state. I'm going to say is loading is false. The reason why I have to put this again here is because remember, it's you start with the start. And then you can either have a success or you can have a failure, right? You can have a success or you can have an error. So I have to make sure that I'm updating everything that needs to be updated every time, right? So is error, if it actually comes back faulty, this is not going to be true. And then whatever the error message is, I'm going to want to bring that in from action.payload.message. The reason why I'm making this .message is because this error, every error has an error.message that you can use, right? So if I were to pass in error.message as the payload here, then all I would have to do is use action.payload. All right. But because this error is an entire object in its own. So now we have our one full action done along with everything that's required of in the reducer. All right. So with that, now I should be able to come into here and pull in my list of PokeNames. So PokeNames, is that how do I call it up here? So yeah, PokeNames, and this is going to be state.pkr.pokenames. All right. So if I wanted to create a list for everything, how do I make this go away? All right. So if I want to create a list for all of the Pokemon names, just like you would do with any other object, right? You can map over that array. So I'm going to do a props.pokenames, and I'm going to do an and because that makes sure that it actually exists. So it doesn't throw an error saying that props.pokenames.map is not a function. All right. Because I'm going to then do my props.pokenames pokenames.map. I don't know why I didn't put error there. .map. So I'm just going to say poke, and then I'm going to return div what key is gonna. I'm just gonna make it a poke. Was it poke.name? Is that what it is? I'll have to look and see exactly what it's called. I don't remember. Yeah, I'm not about that either. Because I need this div here. All right. Let me clear this up. And then let me see what happens if I refresh this. Oh yeah, because I don't have anything actually coming here. So let's see what is actually in that state object, because I don't know. Is it poke.item.name? Let's see. Next state, we have this poke names. So it's not .item. It should just be .name. So for this, it should just be. I'm not having it actually show anything yet, though. So if I do poke.name here, then it should show me all the names that I want to see. Yeah, see? Do you understand what that is? You good? Okay. All right. All right. So now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make these where they're clickable, right? And whenever you click on this, it's going to do an Axios call to get the information for this individual Pokemon. All right. So I'm going to bring in React Router DOM. React Router DOM. I'm going to wrap my source index and my app inside of a router tag. So import browser router as router from React Router DOM. All right. Just a second. And then I'm going to wrap this in my router and then put one below my provider here. Router. All right. Come on. And then instead of this, I'm going to make these a link. So I'm going to import links here. Import a link from React Router DOM. I'm going to make this a link. So instead of this, I'm just going to make this a link to equals poke.name. And then I'll make that a link also. All right, so now each of these, oh, no, that should be right. Link to equals that. Okay, yeah, all that should work. What don't you like? Element type is invalid. Element what got undefined? That should not. Link comes from React Router DOM. Maybe. Well, this isn't right. Link to equals slash What does it? I hate whenever this. Come, let's do that. There we go. So that goes like that. But why does it not like? Is that what it didn't? No, this doesn't like it. Link is a thing. Link to Poke. Yeah. React router DOM. Maybe I need, hold on, I may need to wrap this in a JSX tag. I don't know if that fixes anything. Nope. Something is really wrong. It shouldn't be. Problems here. Element type is invalid. Oh, maybe. Hold on. So I think that's actually in here that it doesn't like. So my router, import browser, because I spelled that wrong. Browser, router as router. Maybe that fixed it. I cut that. Hey, there we go. All right, so that fixed it. Kind of. All right, so I'm going to just to make this a list again. Class name is going to equal names, and then see if I can't fix that real quick. Names, display, flex direction, column. All right. So now if I click on this, it takes me to a page where I don't get anything. So I'm going to now inside of here, I'm going to import in my routes. Import route from React router DOM. All right. And then route exact path equals home. And then make this a route. There we go. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have to make this do a couple of different things, right? Because I want it to do, yeah. So I should be able to get rid of that, and then it should take me back home. So I want us to do a couple of things. So whenever I click on this, I want it to do an Axios call to get the information that I want, right? Which I can do with this same props.get Pokemon function. And then I also want it to send me to that page, right? So I'm going to bring in here the same thing I did before, and I'm going to import in my get Pokemon from my actions file. So store actions. All right. And then I'm also going to pass it in down here. Get Pokemon. All right. So I'm on my on click here. I'm going to do, let's see if I can make this work the way that I want to. I don't know if it's going to, but we're going to see. I'm going to put an on click on this also. On click equals, and I'm going to see if I can't get it to do two things. So I'm going to see if I can't get it this link to send you to here, and then also to do this Axios call here. So on click, I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to create another function for this. No, I'm going to call this get IND Pokemon, because I want to get the individual information, and because I also want to show you guys creating multiple more cases for that. So let me get rid of this. I'm going to bring in my actions file, and I'm going to call it export const get IND Pokemon. All right, this is going to take in a name. I'm just going to have it pass in a name, and then yeah, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to return our dispatch, and then dispatch type here is going to be fetch IND, and I'm just going to call this fetch IND start. And then let's see. So I'm not worried about this. Not worried about this. What does it say? Non-empty expressions. I don't. Okay, I'm not worried about that. So that's in here. It does not like that. That's fine. What is this? Where is that at? PokeList.jsx is on line 35. Is that what it says? Down here. Oh, okay. Because of this, right? There, that's missing. All right. So now if I do this, the next thing this is going to do is Axios dot get, and then this is going to take in two things. The first one is being this here. So I'm going to make this like that. I'm going to do this. And then the second thing that this is going to take is whatever this name is here. Dot then this right here should get a response. And then I'm going to do a couple things first. Console log res.data.results. And then I'm also going to have it dispatch a success. So type is going to be fetch IND success. My payload, well, this is RESP. Data.results. My payload here is going to be res.data, and I would just go from there. All right. So now I have this. I'm going to come into here. I'm going, instead of that here, I'm going to pull in get IND Pokemon, and the same thing here. I'm just going to change this to get IND Pokemon. And then on the on click here, on click is going to be props.get IND Pokemon, except for we want this to wait on us to call this instead, and then we're gonna. All right, this right here should be pokey.name. Alrighty, so now if this goes the way that I want it to go, then if I click on one of these names, I should receive, at least see something show up in my console over here, right? So fingers crossed, something's going to show up. So if I click on Bulbasaur, something showed up, but I get undefined because it may not be res.data.results. It may just be res.data. Let's see. So I should probably put a home button in here somewhere. All right, let's see. Yeah, let me do that real quick. Let me put in a home button that's always around. Link 2 equals that home, and then There we go. So now if I hit this, I can still go home. All right. But if you see what that did for us, that just gave us this, right? So I clicked on Bulbasaur and that did this access call. It gave me this here. So now I can go in and I can save all of this information inside of like this individual Pokemon here, right? So being that I just dispatched something inside of my actions file, I dispatched a success, right? So what do I need to do down here? Being that I've created a couple of dispatches, I need to create the cases for those dispatches, right? So the case here is going to be the first one, which is fetch ind start. And then return. I'm just going to set my same is loading to true. And then I'm going to move on to my next case, which is a successful, right? So fetch ind succ. And then I'm going to return an updated. Oh, I need to actually spread my state and update it first. State. State. And then my is loading, just like before. I'm going to set this to false because it's no longer loading. My Pokemon, yep, just the individual Pokemon here is going to be set to the action.payload. All right. And then just the same as I did for everything else, if there's a success, there's a chance that there could be an error. So I need to do a dot catch here. All right. And I need to do a dispatch just like we did before. For my type, this is going to be fetch ind error with a payload. Yes, this is being recorded, Gabriel. I don't know if he's still in here or not, but yes, it is being recorded. And then I will upload it as soon as I'm done. So this right here is getting, I'm doing the same thing with the error here. I'm going to send the whole error over, and then I will make my case for my fetch ind err and return my state object. Uploading or changing my, I can never spell, loading to true. I don't know where that just went. Or I'm sorry, this is false because it's no longer loading. Is error is going to be true now because there's an error. Error here is going to be action.payload.message. And that should get us all the information we need for our individual Pokemon. What is going on here? What does it not like? What does it not like here? So no, that because no, that should be fine. There we go. Let's take out that. All right. So now we just need to get something to display on our individual Pokemon pages, right? So I'm going to create another component. I'm just going to call it Pokemon.jsx. All right. Just like I did on our app.js file, and just like I did inside of our PokeList, I need to be able to access some sort of state for these Pokemon, right? So I need to be able to access that Pokemon actual name. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to say, let's do, well, first we're going to import React from React. I'm going to import connect from React Redux. I'm going to create my function. So function is going to be Pokemon eventually. All right, I'm going to pass my props into here. I'm going to return. I don't even know what information comes back from this. Let's see. I don't know. This is not worried about it though. That's fine. All right, so I'm gonna give it a name. There's gotta be a name somewhere. All right, so yeah, it's gonna update, which is gonna aggravate me, but it'll be all right. So a div ind Pokemon. All right. So I want to give let's just say an H2 that's going to be props dot Pokemon dot name. All right. I need to connect this to props. So const map state to props is going to take in state just like it did before. It's going to return to us an object. This I'm just going to put Pokemon, and then this is going to be state.pkr.pokemon. Right? Everybody still with me so far? Almost there. And then export default connect, right? With our map state to props. Our empty object here because we're not calling any actions. And then we need to actually export our Pokemon. All right. Now, very last piece, right, is doesn't not even have to do with this. It has everything to do with how we're going to display this, right? So we are going to want to create a route, exact path equals, oh man, what is this going to equal out to? Props dot pokey, or is that what it is? I hate trying to do this. Props dot Pokemon dot name. And this is going to be Pokemon. I may have to work on that piece of it, but because routing for that always kind of gets me every once in a while, but we're going to figure this out. So import Pokemon from components / Poke. Nope. All right. So what is my problem here? Unexpected token app.js 1847. Because nope. Okay. What is it still not like that? What is it not like? Oh, because it's not. Oh. It's fine. Because we're going to pass in Pokemon here. This is going to be state.pokemon dot, or no, state.pkr dot Pokemon. All right. So now, hey, there we go. And now there's also an image in here. So I'm just going to like throw an image on there. So it's not just that, which is somewhere. I don't, where are, let's move species. Oh, here we go. Species. So, so we need, the image source is going to be species.u. No, that's not. No, wait, that's not it. Oh, there we go. So where is front default? Oh man, let's see. So Poke list. Nope. Pokemon here. If we give it an image source equals props dot Pokemon dot, what was it? Its name sprites. Is that what it is? Sprites dot front dot default. Sprites dot front. Come on. We're almost there. Front underscore default. Hey, there we go. Now we have a little bitty image down there. But all right. That gets us to there at least. And then if we hit home, we can click on anybody and it will bring up that information. I mean, it's kind of generic, but it works. And this was not meant for you guys to have a full understanding of how to use Redux, but hopefully to give you guys some sort of a helpful nudge in the right direction and to kind of see how it all comes together and how it works on top of what you're going to get in class over the next 2 weeks or so. All right. Does anybody have any questions that I can take a chance at answering now before I let you guys go? If you guys have a question, you guys can unmute yourselves and ask if you want. That's up to you guys.
Mark, concerning the dispatch function and that we're sending in the action, where are we getting that function from? So is it from the reducer?
Yeah, okay, dispatch. So dispatch is just, it's part of Redux. It's you're dispatching an action. So there's actually a hook. It's called a use dispatch, which if is that Redux or is that React? Hold on, let me see exactly which one that comes from. Where is, because use dispatch is actually a hook that you can use. I think it's okay, let's see. I'm sure that's React Redux.
Because you're using dispatch as a global function. So this is provided if you wrap your app with a provider component.
Yep.
Yeah, because you're using it as a global function, yani.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can use dispatch here. So like in here, if I wanted to dispatch something else, like say I just wanted to I'm just going to create something down here, some random case that's not really going to do anything except for, I'm just going to call it case update loading. And then I'm just going to return is loading is going to be true, right? So like say if in here, I could actually use my use dispatch. I'm just gonna say const dispatch equals use dispatch. So this is, if you think about this, is just like your history in your router. This is almost just like your history and your push and stuff like that, right? So then I can actually dispatch an action here and say in this same, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'll put an error. I'll make to say it is error is gonna be true, and then error here is going to be there's an error here, just to throw something, right? So then I will give it a dispatch here, and I'll say dispatch. Then I can do the same thing. I can say type is update loading, even though it's not doing that anymore. Update loading, right? So on the initial load, did I do that again? I always get like this stupid thing backwards. All right, now because maybe it's not from here, maybe it's from Redux. One of them, import use dispatch from Redux, maybe. And then this is not a. See, now let's see, that isn't like. That's PGO. Okay, so it's no, so it is from React Redux. That's gonna irritate me. I'm not spelling something correctly, but either way, yes. So dispatch comes from Redux itself, from within Redux, and that's how it's telling it which case it needs to look at here. So they work together to figure out which case dispatch. No, where am I? Oh, this right here. That's how it tells it what it needs to actually update and what it needs to do, right? Is based off whatever you dispatch. Any other questions?
No.
You guys good? If you guys are good, I'm good. Pidgeotto's mad at me apparently, but I mean it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but I mean you can see how to go back and forth and how it updates all your state. Not doing this in Code Sandbox and actually doing this in Chrome itself makes those tools like Redux Thunk and Redux Logger a lot easier to use for debugging. Because then you can actually see what each one of those calls are doing. So each one of those state updates, each piece of it actually does, how it transforms, like it starts here and then there's a success and then what your previous state was, what action was dispatched, and then what your next state object is going to be based off that, right? And so it's easy to see where your errors are coming in and what's not working whenever you're using those, all right? All right, y'all. Well, I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. As soon as this